Unprocessing your diet is something that a lot more people are becoming aware of. It's something that I think has become a lot more mainstream these days. And your book is just a great resource for folks who want to try and put that into practice, right? Why don't you talk us through why unprocessing your diet is so important and some of the tips that you've come across your career, but also the things that you've been putting into your book as well?
Well, I feel like ultra-processed foods are sort of a bit of a runaway train at the moment. So why I think it's important to unprocess your diet is because if we don't do something, a couple of steps now, they're just going to continue to sort of take over our diets. It's hard to walk into a newsagent, a corner shop, your local grocery shop, and not see aisles and aisles of ultra-processed food. So unfortunately, until the government sort out our food system, make it more equal, make healthy eating more affordable, we've got to do it on our own.
Yeah.
With, people like us in the industry's help, obviously. Like, it's our job, isn't it, to make things easier and like share tips. So one of the things that's been playing on my mind, I read the intro to my first book, which came out about 15 years ago. And
15 years ago?
I think so, yeah. No, hang on, I'm lying. I started Private Chefing 15 years ago.
Okay.
I think it came out 12 years ago.
Okay. That's still a long time ago.
Yeah, I've been around.
Amazing.
I've been around. We met a long time ago.
We met a while ago, yeah.
We met in a Mexican restaurant, didn't we?
Yeah.
Anyway, for another podcast. So I read that intro and I was talking about like overly processed food and super processed food. And the term ultra processed food's been around since about 2010. I didn't know it back in 2010, but I was conscious of these overly processed foods that were far away from whole foods. But the realistic nature of modern day life is that we don't exist on just whole foods. And no one is saying that processed foods, minimally processed foods, are bad for you. But we now know that ultra processed foods and eating a diet high in them is linked to serious poor health outcomes. And it's said that your average UK adult is eating close to 2/3 of their diet, and it's even higher in our under 14s. And I'm a new mum, and then I read that sales of vegetables went down in 2022, like far down. And I thought, this can't be right. So that's why I wanted to tackle this topic. And when I say tackle, I mean it, because a lot of people, quite rightly, I mean, it's so important to discuss these things from every angle, are like, but for some people, they don't have a choice but to eat ultra-processed foods. And that's where obviously the government come in, and big food need to be really explicit about their ingredients labels, and it needs to be really obvious so that if people do eat this, they know what they're getting in for. Anyway, another topic. But what I can do as a cookbook author is to make it as simple as possible, to make healthy food as convenient as possible.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge I set myself. And so my book split up into the chapters that are the most tricky, sticky areas. So like for me, and I know a lot of people, breakfast, working lunches, snacks, be they sweet or those like lovely, salty, crunchy ones that you want about 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I eat ultra processed foods. They play a smallish part of my diet, my cupboards. I don't tend to have a huge amount at home.
Yeah.
Only because by their very nature, they're quite irresistible, right?
Yeah.
And I'm of a personality type where if I can see it, I'll eat it. And that goes for fruit and veg as well. So if I make sure I have these healthy foods at home so that I'm more likely to eat them. So yeah, that's why I wanted to tackle it. I was really also inspired by the work that some people were doing about ultra-processed foods, and they were talking about it in terms of government and big food, and I wanted to just bring it back to our level and see what I could do.
Yeah. I think what you said about being a new mum, like we're expecting our first child in the next couple of months.
Very exciting.
It is exciting, but I think what you mentioned there about the stats for kids and how a larger proportion of their diets is becoming ultra processed. And I think particularly as parents get busier and we lose those home cooking skills, it's just a natural function that we're going to that kids are going to become more reliant on ultra processed foods as well. So I think that's where you need to put a stake into the ground and actually just teach people the very basics of like how to unprocess your diet as much as possible, because I still have ultra processed foods in my diet as well. There are
what are
some
the ones you like?
So I love gochujang,
Yeah.
which is very hard to get like a quote unquote clean gochujang that doesn't have high fructose corn syrup in or emulsifies, whatever. But I use it in such small amounts as like a marinade or, a flavor enhancer to what is going to be a largely unprocessed recipe or meal anyway, that I don't think it actually holds that much weight in terms of the ill health effects. Other ones are like marinades and sauces. I try and make those from scratch as much as possible, but
you're human.
You're human. And as a busy parent, you'll know this more than anyone. It's going to be very hard to cook everything from scratch unless you've got hours and hours of time and you don't run your own business and all the rest of it. So those are probably the two areas where I tend to have more ultra processed foods. I used to have to rely on those kind of snacky foods or meal deals when I was out and about, but now I've actually become a lot more intuitive about fasting when I'm out. And I know that's for me. I can do that, but let's say you're a pregnant lady, you can't like fast for long periods of time, and if you're on the road, you're going to have to rely on what's available to you. So I say that with as much compassion as I can, but I know like I don't need to rely on ultra processed foods and all that, because I can just tap into my fasting window or just increasing the amount of time between meals for me.
Yeah. And for those people that want to have just a handy snack, like your good old nuts and seeds, and I have my boyfriend's like, you're like a magpie. If there's ever like a little container or a little jar that comes through our front door, I like squirrel it away, and I'm like, oh, that will make the perfect like little nut container to pop in my handbag. When it's summer now, but when you put on a winter coat and you like put your hand in, you're like, oh, am I going to find like a £5 note? I've always got like some really old nuts for those moments when you need them. Anyway, so yeah, absolutely. There's a time and a place for all/most foods. And I think it's really important that when we talk about ultra processed foods and unprocessing your diet, we're not talking about cutting anything out completely. We're not demonizing. We're just thinking, right, research is showing that eating high amounts is linked to serious poor health outcomes, including mental health, which is something I'm super interested in. And so instead of letting ultra processed foods dominate my plate, I want whole foods and minimally processed foods to dominate my plate. So I'm trying to like flip reverse it. And unfortunately, it is pretty hard, depending on where you live, to do that unless you cook more. So I can't pretend it's an easy switch to make, but I actually feel that the busier I get, the more I rely on healthy food. And I haven't slept for a year, having a gorgeous little one and I don't sleep. So I'm like sleep deprived, and I need that real food more and more. So I know if I ate a lot of ultra processed foods that I wouldn't feel fantastic. So I'm like making my time in the kitchen count more. I'm making my fridge and freezer and my cupboards work for me even more. And I've become really reliant on them. So I wrote this book when my baby was like age 2 months to maybe like 7 months. So I was really guinea pigging myself in the sense that I was thinking, what can you make when your brain's like, wah. And often I only had one arm free to cook.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
But so a lot of it is bung it in. A lot of it is tray bakes. A lot of it is one pots. And there's nothing new here. This is not pioneering food. But I really wanted to put my most doable and delicious recipes all together in one book. And I've got people that have been making the recipes from the book that actually aren't interested in ultra processed foods. And they are buying it because they just love the recipes. And I've got people that are really interested and love food and are real foodies. And they're thinking, right, I just need some like tips and tricks to help me eat less of them. And then I've got people that are like, do you know what? And this is the sort of way I think about it is if you want to unprocess your diet, actually don't think about ultra processed foods. Just think real food.
Yeah.
The more you think about putting more whole food and minimally processed food on your plate, the more you're like shoving the ultra processed food off the plate because there's just less room for them.
Yeah.
So that's one like nice way of thinking about it, because we all know that fearing food and worrying about it is not going to lead to like positive long-term change. So yeah, concentrating on those good old fruit, veggies, pulses, beans, legumes, herbs, spices. I mean, we all know the drill.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's about putting in a strategy that allows you to lean into that and tap into that I want to get to. And just on your point about mental health, I think it's a really important one to make because it's almost like a vicious cycle, right? So we know ultra processed foods can lead to worse outcomes when it comes to your propensity to mental health, your likelihood of depression, et cetera. We also know that when you are in a stressed state, let's say you're chronically underslept or you have a lot of stress in the workplace or whatever, you can self-soothe with hyperpalatable comfort foods.
Yeah.
So when you're at home and you're stressed and you know that you've got those like cookies and donuts and the salty, sugary snacks, you will reach for them more because that's what your body is literally telling you to do. And then when you eat them, your satiety signals are completely out of whack as well because those can be disrupted by ultra processed foods. So you get into this vicious cycle where the foods that are causing the mental health issues in some capacity can lead you to overconsume the hyperpalatable foods that worsens the situation. So you find people like in this.
Yeah.
So that's why for me, I know that snacks are a bit of my kryptonite. I have to keep them out of the house.
Yeah.
I know that if there are some snacks in my cupboards, I'm going for those. And so I've got to be really regimented with my cupboards, which is going to be difficult when I got kids, when I've got my wife that doesn't think the same way and has a lot more self-control than me. And when you find yourself in an environment that there's snacks everywhere, like in a certain workplace. Just a quick one. If you're enjoying this content, you will love my mini series on inflammation. I go through the different types of foods that you should be having, what inflammation actually is, plus lifestyle practices to reduce inflammation. You can get it for free right now in the link in the caption below. Back to the podcast.
My baby had some of those we had like some of those like kid rice, like there was a packet of kiddie rice cakes or something, and up until that point she would go for berries, she would go for sardines, liver, egg. She heard like the crackle and the crunch of the packet. She saw the brightly colored cartoon in the logo. She felt it on her like lovely like little teethy gummies that were like a bit sore from teething.
Yeah.
And she obviously loved the taste, right? And then literally the next time she heard me like open a packet of like spaghetti or like she heard a packet rustle, her head whipped so fast.
Wow. Really?
Her head was like, what is that? Because she knew that quickly that was like exciting and food. And it's so interesting. There's a couple of books about ultra processed food that really delve into the science and like the way that not just the food is ultra processed, but the way that the marketing of it, everything to do with it and how clever it is. And it is to do as well with the packaging and the marketing. And I've been involved with a couple of amazing food charities and campaigning groups that have campaigned for, no junk food advertising before the watershed, which is so hugely important. Although, I mean, it's a first step, but of course, most kids don't even watch normal TV like we did, like us 80s kids. Are you an 80s kid?
I am.
Yeah.
85.
I'm 85 too. What month are you born?
June.
Oh, I'm a September. Are you a Gemini?
Yeah, I'm Gemini.
Oh my God. I'm surrounded by Geminis. It's actually insane. I think 60% of my friendship group is Geminis. The rest is Virgos like me. Anyway, that's boring chat. But kids, us 80s lot, could have probably benefited from no junk food advertising before the watershed. Now kids are not consuming media like that, but it's still a first step in reducing what kids are seeing. And did you know about Pesta Power? Not pesto.
No,
pesto.
I was going to say pesto. Like pesto is pretty
Pesto
good.
is powerful. Like a pest. So you know, at the aisles when you check out, if parents and kids, or just, you know, like straight up kid, like, you know, when you're just queuing and you're hungry and you're tired, because often we know not to shop when we're hungry and tired, but that's real life. And then you start seeing snacks and meal deals at the aisle just when you're trying to check out. Or if you online shop, have you ever noticed when you try and complete an order, they just keep advertising pages, so like keep refreshing the page and like showing you, are you sure you don't want this, are you sure you don't want that? That's a form of Pesta Power, because you're just being marketed something at your most vulnerable, clickable, like shopping basket ad moment. So, you know, within my book, there's obviously delicious, doable recipes. That's standard in a cookbook, fair enough. Then there's like top 5 things you'd have in the freezer, fridge, cupboards. We've just been rooting around in your freezer, haven't we? Like, we know when you've got a well-stocked freezer, you're like halfway to a good meal. You're halfway to making more positive food choices. And then I've got this bit in the book, which my publishers were like, don't put that in because there's no photos. You know, people like photos in a cookbook. This is going to be a bit of a boring page. I was like, I'm going to try and not make it boring, but I think it's really useful. And there's about 6 double pages called How to Build. And it's like how to build like an epic sandwich. So when you're making your own sandwich, or if you find yourself in a spot where you're buying a shop bought sandwich, what can you add to it to make it healthier, to get more plant points in, to make it more satiating? So all of these things, like how to build a really good lunchbox, how to build a snack box, how to build a great salad that you actually want to eat and look forward to eating. So I think that's really important as well, because
they're just cooking building blocks that people need to, like we were talking earlier about how I can like open the fridge door and I could see like a jar of grilled artichokes, some rocket, some tomatoes, and in my head, you know, immediately there's 2 or 3 different things I can make with that. There's a salad, there's a stew, I can add some cumin to it, or do you know what I mean? But most people don't have that reflex of how they can combine ingredients together. And some, you know, I think that sort of pattern on those like no recipe recipes, those building blocks, those foundational skills are really important to teach people.
You're lucky that you've been shown how to do that or learned it yourself. I'm privileged that my mum showed me that because my mum didn't want to waste money eating out. She didn't want me to buy, you know, food out. She wanted it to be cooked at home. But most people haven't been given school education. Their parents might have been working multiple jobs. Their parents weren't cooking. And now with rising food costs and like people don't want to turn on their oven, which is completely understandable. It's about, coming back to making your time in the kitchen count, getting the most from your groceries, both from a food waste perspective, don't want to throw your money away perspective. And thinking about taste buds, the Food Foundation, who I quote in the book, they had this study, and it really shocked me I was pregnant at the time, about how worried they are about kids who are relying on or who are eating such highly processed kids who are growing up eating high UPF diets and are not eating a huge amount of fruit and veg. They are then unable to tolerate the taste of vegetables as they get older, which I think maybe like we grew up with some kids, or we were that kid that didn't like it, but eventually got to the point we did. It's going to potentially become a crisis point where kids feel sick eating vegetables because the taste profile is so different. And I know, and probably lots of people know, if you've been on holiday and you've been having like your ice cream every like 10 o'clock every morning, and then you've had dessert at lunch because you're on holiday, you've had dessert at dinner, it's a rude awakening when you're like back on the tube on a Monday morning and you're like, where's my sugar here? But you can quickly become used to the taste of sugary or sugar-based foods. And I'm talking about savory foods as well that are high in sugar. And I wanted my child to grow up in a world where she explored all the amazing flavors that were available to her. and got like a really diverse diet, because we also know that we eat the same like 4 crops, corn, soy, wheat and rice. And you and I were just talking about our dogs and what our dogs eat. And my mum used to say, I was about to do an impression of my mum, but it's just she's gonna kill me. She'd be like, you know, you're a cook and we love food, and I can't sit here and eat while our dog eats the same meal over and over again. And I agree. Like my dog's like my first child and I love her. And of course, like, why should my dog not have loads of variety and diversity in her diet? And unfortunately also, I'm totally going off topic. Well, you can use animal food as, it's quite a good study, because most animal foods are made up of, they're like quite, like I would call filler foods. They're like really high starch. The meat is more expensive, so that it's just very high on the rice, let's say, or the corn, or the wheat. There's not much diversity. There's not much plant. There's maybe not huge amounts of fiber, and your dog can probably just carry on eating it.
Yeah, there's actually a rising obesity crisis within domesticated animals.
Oh God!
Yeah, which
another thing to feel upset about.
Which is a function, I believe, of the lack of them going out and exercising, because their owners don't go out as much. That's part of the problem. But I think it's also the food that they're consuming as well. So it's a lot of refined, processed, a lot of bone oil instead of actual like meat, quality meat products that are in their feed. And it's interesting that it's kind of in line with how we're also eating as well, right? I want to go back to some of the strategies that you mentioned.
Yes.
So freezer, meal deal. Like if you're somebody who is partial to a meal deal, like sandwiches, crisps, Fanta, whatever, we know that's very ultra processed, high in carbohydrates. What are some of the options that people can have? Because that, I think, is a lot of people's downfall.
Yeah. The like British meal deal that we all grew up with.
Yeah. People love it as well. Like,
I remember when I was younger being like, one day I'm going to work in an office and I'm going to buy my own meal deal lunch and like have a briefcase. Yeah. Anyway, yes, that is our sort of standard Monday to Friday working lunch. I think drinks, I think if you're going to start anywhere, I think drinks are a great place to start, because I mean, I've never been a fizzy drink. I've never been mad for fizzy drinks, but you know, I've tasted them. I can see why why people get really into them. I think that is probably one of the best places you can start. And that's going to be a big old shock to the system. But one of the things I love to do is, I mean, we talk about this a lot with ginger. Here's me saying your favorite fizzy drink, and I'm like, hey, what about a bit of ginger? But ginger is an amazing food. I used to be a private chef. That's how I started, at helping people with cravings. And so one thing, if someone wanted to go cold turkey on their fizzy drinks, or just start winning themselves off, is making their own, or you could just buy your ginger shots, but thinking about flavors that really like are delicious and shocking on your system, but are also good for you. So I would go citrusy, I would go gingery, I'd add some sparkling water, and I would make that a drink. And I think straight away, your taste buds are going to go, wow, wowza. 3 days later, you'll probably lessen your cravings for your fizzy drinks, and then you'll be ready to start on the next part of your journey. Yeah.
But that's a really good point about fizzy drinks, I think, because sugar sweetened beverages, we know, will mainline sugar to your bloodstream, but straight to your liver, and that can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and that actually is a big contributor to overall energy intake, which we tend to overconsume in modern society as well. So that would be a great way to start.
Can I tell you, actually, while I'm just thinking of a few things that I suggest that people do, which include looking at your drinks. Yeah. And I think the drink like door of your fridge, if I imagine like the number of fridges I've been into in people's lives, and my fridge, like the fridge is like there, isn't it? When you open up a fridge, if you imagine, it's like right by your side, and that is where I think it's so easy to grab. It's like the most grabbable bit of the fridge. It's why people put their milk in there, and like maybe their chocolate, if they're people that keep chocolate in the fridge. Some of us do, some of us don't. So what you've got to do is replace it. So this is the thing where you said you feel you can't have snacks at home. So for me, it is about adding in. So whether it's my so I've got this recipe for sticky nuts and seeds, which is like, I wouldn't feel satisfied just chomping on like plain nuts and seeds. So I flavor them up in different ways. So I might keep a jar of nuts and seeds in the fridge. I keep my really dark chocolate, my 80% plus. I keep coconut water. I don't have huge amounts of it, but when I really want something like sweet and delicious and different than just something I'd make myself, I put there. I keep small jars of lemon and lime juice for that purpose. And also when I stopped drinking to have a baby, I'd be like, what am I going to drink? I don't necessarily want all the mocktaily drinks every day. There's such a big market for it. But I remembered that when I'd go on holiday, I would adore fresh lime, mint, and sparkling water. Basically a mojito, but not a no-hito. That's what they call it.
Yeah.
So I make sure I have like squeezed lime, because I'm not going to go and look for my lemon or lime squeezer or get a knife and a chopping board out. And I just keep that fridge. Or if you think about the fridge shelf that is eye level with you. So I'm 5'9", so I might have a different fridge eye level from someone else. That is where I look, and that is where I keep my healthy go-to snacks. I don't keep them at the bottom. I don't keep them at the back. They're going to go off and get wasted.
That's such a good point. That's like
you've got to see it to believe it, right?
Yeah. And then you've got to think about like grocery aisles as well. There's a reason why there are certain items at eye level versus the ones that are kind of out of sight or like hard to reach.
Or also when you walk in to your big shop, you often can't get to the fruit and veg for a while. You're like going past all the aisles that are making the high profits first. And then you're like, hey, where can I get an apple or an onion or something like that? But actually, speaking of the freezer, okay, so let me just, I'm getting very excited and jumping around. But one of the things, we talked about, I think we've hammered home about drinks, just enough for today. Another thing is thinking about the freezer aisle. So when you go to the shop, when you go to supermarkets, so let's say we're talking about supermarkets right now, take advantage of what they're selling you from their freezer aisle. You can get chopped onions, you can get your mixed berries, which are so much cheaper, as we know, than buying fresh berries, and they'll spoil less. So you can make like my 5-minute frozen yogurt with berries and yogurt as an example. So when you want that sweet treat, you want it in the freezer, you want it to come together quickly, it's there. You can have edamame beans, which I know you absolutely love. You can grab your sweet corn mixes. You can get cauliflower. How do you feel about cauliflower in a smoothie?
I love cauliflower.
But in a smoothie?
Yeah.
Oh, you like it in a smoothie?
In a smoothie?
Yeah.
I haven't even heard of that.
Yeah. So
what?
Our American friends, some of the American chefs I follow, they put cauliflower. See, I used to put courgette in smoothies because courgettes can be, I don't want to say tasteless.
Or whatever, but it's a lot of water. I get that.
But cauliflower is pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really? I would have thought it would have been too bitter.
Have you got any? Should we go make some?
We could try
I'm going to go and get some.
But surely you've got to like add a bit more flavour to...
Oh, God, yeah. Not just pure cauliflower. Hey, listen, times are tough, but I'm not suggesting a pure cauliflower smoothie. No. But what can you get from the freezer and put in your freezer that is going to make your life easier? So, okay, let me just think. Where am I? I've got this vision of me serving you a cauliflower smoothie now.
I know, yeah. I'm thinking of that as well. Like, oh gosh, I'm into my healthy eating, but there's a limit.
She's had a baby. She's gone crazy. But actually, do you know what? Being pregnant taught me a lot of things because I couldn't eat a vegetable for about 6 months.
Really? Oh gosh, that would have been so difficult for you.
I was trying to recipe test at the time as well.
Oh wow.
And so ginger came up a lot.
Yeah.
I was really craving cheese, which was, a nice high fat protein food that I could eat. I kept reminding myself, my child is going to be fine because of course, like a lot of what your baby is using when your baby's growing in you is not your food literally as it comes in and out. It's like my diet before I got pregnant. So I tried not to stress about that because you and I are both the firm believer of if you stress about it, it's, there's no point. I always think, no, don't stress while you're eating a kale salad. There's no point. Don't hate and stress a kale salad. But also, what was I just about to say? My food cravings. Yeah. When I would really crave sugar, I read that eating protein was a good thing to do. So when I was feeling low on energy, I was pregnant, all of these like my hormonal changes, growing, a new liver, growing a set of lungs that afternoon, I would reach for more protein when I was craving sugars.
It was a protein super satiating. It's really good in terms of like making sure that you're not going to overeat. A lot of people are craving the nutrients that are in high protein foods, but they interpret that as a sugar craving. And then also there's like a high thermic effect of processing protein as well. So you're going to use a lot of that energy to break down the proteins itself, and amino acids, building blocks of life. So, that's what babies need when you're growing a baby as well.
Yeah. It's funny though, isn't it? You're like, ooh, the mouth and head is saying sugar, the body's saying protein. So that was a really interesting exercise, I think.
Yeah.
Being pregnant.
Yeah.
So sorry, back to the tips. So here are just like a kind of like quick fire things that I would try and do is I would always freeze a fave. So anything that was like my go-to cozy comfort food that was definitely not something I'd make on a Monday night, but I knew would be satiating. I knew I'd love, and I knew I could get some veggies in. So I think my bolognese in this book's got mince, lentils, and like 9 different vegetables in as well. So I don't make that weekly. I make that monthly, and I freeze. I would often think, how can I add more vegetables? So whether it was my cauliflower into my smoothie, to be confirmed whether that goes down well, or I would keep one of my favorites is frozen spinach, because you just throw it into any dish and it cooks in a minute or so. And leafy greens, I remember when I was researching foods and mental health, and of course there's not one food that's going to support your mental health, but I saw that a lot of people were talking about lots of us are deficient in leafy greens. Like we just are not getting as many leafy greens. Maybe we're eating the same old fruit and vegetables. And on that topic, I would think every time I would do a weekly shop, I'd think, okay, what if I add one less ultra processed food to my shopping list? And what if I add one more whole food or one more minimally processed food? And then I did the maths, and now I can't remember it. But then in a month, you're adding, you're taking away 4 ultra processed foods. You're adding 4 whole foods. So in a year, 4 times 12 is 12, 24, 36, 48.
Yeah.
You've got basically 50 new whole foods in your diet, 50 less ultra processed foods. So that's a nice, easy way.
That's a good way of thinking
of getting
about
it in.
Yeah.
Just keep it as simple
and
as that.
Very achievable as well. If you're just thinking
Very
about
achievable. And also no one's in competition here. No one's saying who can cut out ultra processed food the fastest. It's just going, okay, what little tweaks can I do? For me, I know like a lot of people, when you start the day off right, you feel better for it in so many ways, whether it's exercising or getting some morning light or not being on your phone. And for me, getting some vegetables under my belt at breakfast is a good one. And I know a lot of people aren't savory breakfast people, but I grew up in a Filipino household where my mom would like make mackerel for breakfast. So I'm okay.
Yeah.
But I love a frittata. I love a mushroom slice. I can eat mushrooms and spinach on toast. Or what can you add to your smoothie, or what can you add to your breakfast pot? So I love a Bersham muesli, which has got grated apple, but I love adding grated carrot too. Sometimes I add grated
I thought you were going to say courgette.
No, I saw your face. I was like, where's he going with it? No.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, oh, okay, I've got 3 different fruit and veg in this morning. And that feels good. And I love it because, I'll make 4 days worth of a Bersham muesli or an overnight oats.
Yeah.
Don't have to think in the morning.
Yeah. That's epic.
So just little things like that. And I think I just really want to hammer home the point that, I love food, like everyone I'm sure listening in here. So none of these ideas are designed to make you sick of a food. There's no like rolling over leftovers and thinking, oh, I'm going to eat it because I know it's healthy or because I can't be bothered to cook today. Like it is about making sure that everything is delicious, but also embracing the whole foods. And satiety is such an interesting one because I agree, like things can so easily and quickly go skew-whiff when it comes to things like that. And I guess the main thing is tapping into how we feel. And I know that I don't feel fantastic on high ultra processed foods. I know I feel really good on whole foods, but I also don't feel great on all whole foods. So a bit like I just said, don't hate and stress about eating a kale salad. There's going to be foods that not all of us feel good on. And I think that when you cut back on ultra processed foods and you eat more minimally processed food, you do start to tap into what feels good in your tummy, like what suits my stomach, what suits my digestion, how do I feel. I saw something that I'd like screenshot on my phone from ages ago, and it was like, I wish that when you saw a food, it would tell you how you would feel afterwards. And so a big thing for me as I get older and older, and as I explore my mental health more, or as I explore tools to help me with my mental health more, I really think about when I eat something, is it going to give or take away from me in an hour's time or half a day's time? And you and I were just talking about like what we drink in the afternoon versus what we drink in the morning, what we eat in the morning, what we eat in the afternoon. Like, I guess I've got less and less time, especially now I'm a parent, to feel crap on food.
Yeah, it's a really good point because, I think people have come around to this idea of particularly caffeinated drinks. Like if you drink a coffee at 10 a.m. versus 2 or 3 p.m., we're becoming more aware of the ramifications of that. Disrupted sleep, a crappy next day, right? Or if you have alcohol, for example, and you drink that, depending on when you're drinking it, how much you're drinking, what the dose is that you can tolerate, etc., that's going to have a knock-on effect. I don't think we have the same sort of intuition or reflex with food. We don't think, oh, if I have this cereal, or I'd certainly think this now, but if I have this cereal, how am I going to feel in 2 or 3 hours time? Am I going to get peckish? Am I going to feel low? Am I going to feel crappy after that sugar high and then corresponding sugar crash? And I think we need to become a lot more intuitive and understanding of the effect of food on our biology over the next hours, but also the next couple of days as well. And I think as a parent, you probably...
And you know what's funny is it's like at the weekend or maybe when we're on holiday, there's certain foods that it doesn't matter so much. But when you've got like a big project, or like I think about if I was to go on live TV tomorrow morning, or I was going to do a big presentation to my boss tomorrow, there's certain things you would do in preparation. And I'm not saying that every day is like that, but there's things I can get away with on a Saturday when I'm chilled and I'm having a duvet day, or I'm like, what duvet days do I have anymore? But let's just say it's a weekend and I'm having a lie, and I can cope with that food hangover or something. Can't do that anymore. I don't need to feel like my bestest self and live my bestest life, but I do want to use food more to make me feel good while I enjoy food. I don't want to I just don't want. I want to feel less crap less often.
Yeah, you want to lean into the functional benefits as well as the flavor as well. And that's it's interesting you say about like you're thinking about your day when you're consuming food. I think about that a lot. Like there are certain days where I can fast until 12 or 1 p.m. and that just suits my lifestyle. It's convenient, etc. But if I'm doing podcasting the entire day, or particularly if I'm doing solo podcasts, or I'm doing filming or whatever, I've got to have breakfast first thing in the morning because I know what my energy levels are like. And when I'm fasting, I don't really tap into that sort of the metabolic switch where I start burning fat and I get, the sort of cognitive benefits. It takes me a lot longer. So I will make sure that I've got a high protein, satiating breakfast that day. And it's usually savory as well. It could be leftovers, it could be, mushrooms, greens on toast or whatever. That I need that, and I know how I feel afterwards just through trial and error. And so figuring out what your preferred meal is for how you want to fuel your day is something that I think people can get used to.
And you say preferred food, it's like that preferred feeling that's unique to you. And I think for people, all of us have hormone fluctuations, but especially at certain times of the month, especially when you're going through pregnancy, postpartum. I didn't realize how long postpartum can go for. There's like certain things that you need more of, and definitely your activity levels and where you are. And I think times of the year we lean into certain foods or eating foods at different times more than others. So I guess in summary, what we're saying is working out what suits you best.
Yeah.
And only you will be able to tell. And it's definitely, don't want to get all mindful eating, but I talk about mindful eating very briefly in the book. And I say, sorry, not sorry if this bit makes your eyes roll. But I do think that I remember 15 years ago, 12 years ago, we wrote the book 15 years ago, but it was 12 years ago that it came out. I remember talking about gut and listening to your gut and gut health. And I remember my publisher at the time being like, what are you doing talking about gut in a cookbook? Obviously, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a gut health specialist, but I cared about gut and food. And I think now the term mindful eating has been more embraced because we've all realized we intuitively know what suits us best. And so, I'm all for whatever, you do you when it comes to the food. Hey?
Yeah. I'm going to do a quick fire round of 3 ingredients that you couldn't live without in your kitchen. So what's the first ingredient? What's your go-to?
What is my go-to? I would say a lovely sea salt. I don't think I could live without. I don't think I could live without salt.
What are we talking? Malden?
I love my Malden. I mean, I'm half Filipino, so I could replace my salt with a tamari or a soy, but I think it would have to be a salt because I love even got lovely peanut butter, no bake bars, chocolate ones with a little bit of sea salt. Okay. So I love it in my sweet
Salt's
and savory.
A good one.
I like how you like quick fire, and I'm like, not all. Salt. A good salt.
Next.
A lovely olive oil. I think obviously we know you need fat in your diet, and people are less afraid of fat now, and we need fat for all of our fat soluble vitamins. So I would say a lovely olive oil or a butter.
Okay.
I don't know which one I could. Yeah, olive oil or a butter.
Which one would you?
Maybe olive oil because I've got a lovely olive oil granola, which I guess would be delicious with butter too.
What kind of oil are we talking? Are we talking a Spanish? Are we talking a Greek? What's your go-to brand, if you can say that?
Well, if I had all the money in the world to live off 2 fields, they're called 2 fields.
Oh, 2 fields, the regenerative oil. Yeah, buddy.
The regenerative olive
Great.
Oil.
Yeah.
And do you know what? I buy for Christmas presents for my colleagues. I buy them 2 fields for Christmas.
Yeah, it's good oil.
It's gorgeous. So, and so salt, olive oil. God, rupee.
People are probably thinking, salt, olive oil, this is so basic. These are things that you don't even put in the recipe list because people always have.
Oh, do you want me to go for more
I think it's really important. I actually appreciate that.
Okay, I'm going to go leafy greens. Okay. I've been through my fertility journey. As you know, I had my baby via frozen embryo, my eggs. And I did a lot of trauma release therapy and mental health soul searching. And during that process I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and ADHD. And so I did a hell of a lot of reading, and like I mentioned earlier on, I went, right, I'm going to up my leafy greens because I feel like I eat so many fruit and veg. I eat loads of herbs and spices. I eat great fats. I try to be a mindful eater. I try and reduce my stress. I try and sleep more. But you know what? I could probably do with a few more dark leafy greens in my diet. They are harder to get when eating out. They're almost impossible to get in your casual dining or in your meal deals. So you know what? I'm going to up more leafy greens at home. And so I would put those as my third. What
would you go
ingredient.
For? A Cavolo Nero?
I love a Cavolo Nero. I love a Cavolo Nero. I love cabbage. We ate a lot of cabbage growing up. I also spent a lot of time. I mean, I'm talking more dark leafy greens, but in terms of the cruciferous families of your Brussels sprouts and your cabbages, I love them too. But I think a good all-rounder is a baby spinach. It's very mild flavor. Easy to sneak into drinks, to baking, to muffins, to frittatas. So I'd go, for a leafy green.
I love how you're getting veggies and drinks. I just got to say that it's brilliant. I don't think it comes intuitively to me, but I appreciate that.
You know what? It's not like I grew up eating that way. I mean, I remember saying to my mum wouldn't have branded snacks and things at home, a lot because she thought it was a huge waste of money because a lot of these foods they used to be more expensive. And I remember begging my mum for a birthday for do you remember those Kellogg's multi-pack cereals? That's all I wanted for my birthday. I could have I mean, they're sweet enough to be like a birthday cake. I was like, I don't need a party. I don't need presents. I just want one of those. So she was pretty good at that. But I have realized what's always worth doing is giving something a go and seeing if you like it. Try that cauliflower in your smoothie. If you don't like it, move on. You might go, wow, I've been thinking I need to eat more fruit and veg. I've been worrying about it. Done. Cauliflower smoothie, done.
Love it. Okay, that's going to be a revelation for me. This is great. Thank you. I'm going to put that in my smoothie next time. This is awesome. If you want to learn to recognize the health foods that are actually quite unhealthy, I would check out this video right here.